She was 8 weeks pregnant. She hadn't told her husband. She hadn't told her sister. She hadn't told a single soul. But when she opened that door, the nursery was already built. The crib, the tiny shoes arranged by size, the rocking chair, monogrammed with a Kensington name, and on the windowsill a journal, her mother-in-law's handwriting. Week 6 confirmed. The bloodline must be protected at all costs. They hadn't just known before she told them. They had been planning this baby before the wedding, before the engagement, before she even knew Felix's last name. And what she found next made her realize she was never a wife to this family. She was a project. Stay with me. Because what Charlene does next, nobody saw coming. Nobody. Hello family, welcome to our channel Lifetales by Sally, where incredible stories of family secrets, hidden love, and life-changing revelations are told. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comment section below, because this story, it is not one you will forget in a hurry. Now let's go back to Charlene. She was 29 years old, sharp-minded, quietly beautiful. The kind of woman who noticed everything, but said only what was necessary. She had married Felix Kensington 2 years ago in a ceremony that looked like a fairy tale from the outside and felt, increasingly, like a negotiation from the inside. Felix was kind. Felix was gentle. But Felix came from a family that treated kindness like a currency, something to be spent only when it served a larger purpose. The Kensingtons were old money. The kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself because the marble floors and 14-bedroom estate announced it for them. Clement Kensington, Felix's father, had built a financial empire across 3 continents. Victoria Kensington, his mother, ran the family's social architecture with the precision of a military general in pearls. And then there was Sommy, Felix's younger sister, who watched everything with those quiet, calculating eyes and smiled only when something was going according to a plan you didn't know existed. Charlene had never fully belonged here. She knew it. They knew it. It was the unspoken agreement of every Sunday dinner. But she had stayed. For Felix. For the version of love she believed they were still building. And now she stood in a nursery that shouldn't exist, touching the edge of a crib that had been built for a baby she hadn't announced, and every instinct in her body was screaming a single word. Run. She didn't run. Not yet. Instead, she did what she always did when something disturbed her. She got quiet and she got smart. She pulled out her phone and photographed everything. The crib. The monogram. The shelves. The mobile. She moved through the room like she was collecting evidence, because some part of her already understood that that was exactly what she was doing. She was nearly at the door when she saw it. A small leather journal on the windowsill. Cream-colored, with a gold-embossed K on the cover. Her hands were steady as she picked it up, steadier than she felt. She opened to the first page. The handwriting was Victoria's. She recognized the sharp, aristocratic loops immediately. Week 6 confirmed. Dr. Osei has verified the hormonal markers. Clement is already making arrangements. The bloodline must be protected at all costs. Felix must never know we intervened. Charlene read it twice. Then she closed the journal, slipped it into the waistband of her trousers beneath her blouse, and walked out of the nursery as calmly as a woman who had not just discovered that her in-laws had been monitoring her body without her knowledge or consent. She walked down the grand staircase. She smiled at the housekeeper. She accepted the cup of tea that was offered to her in the sitting room. And on the inside, she was detonating. She called Kendra that night from the bathroom, both taps running to cover her voice, sitting on the cold tile floor with her knees pulled to her chest. "Ken," she whispered, "I need you to listen to me very carefully and not scream." Kendra, older by 3 years and twice as dramatic, immediately said, "I'm already screaming internally. What happened?" "They built a nursery." Silence. "Who built a what?" "The Kensingtons. In the East Wing. It's fully furnished, Kendra. There's a monogrammed rocking chair. And Victoria has been journaling about my pregnancy. A pregnancy I found out about 4 days ago and have told absolutely no one." The silence on the other end was the loudest Charlene had ever heard. "Charlene." Kendra's voice had dropped. All the drama was gone. "How is that possible?" "I don't know yet. But I'm going to find out. You need to leave that house." "I can't just leave, Ken." "Felix. Felix's family bugged your uterus, Charlene." "They didn't bug Charlene exhaled. "They have a doctor. Someone named Dr. Osei. They've been monitoring my hormones. I think they've had access to my medical file somehow, Or they've been running tests without my knowledge. Maybe in my food. Maybe through the blood draws I had last month that Felix said were routine. Another silence. Longer this time. Charlene. That's not love. That's ownership. The word landed in the bathroom and stayed there, floating above the sound of running water. Ownership. That was the word Charlene had been circling for 2 years without ever quite landing on it. I need a few days, Charlene said. I need to understand the full picture before I move. If I run now, they'll know I know, and I lose every advantage. And if you stay? Charlene looked at her reflection in the mirror across from where she sat. Her face was calm. Her eyes were not. If I stay, she said softly, I find out exactly how deep this goes. She hung up. She sat for a long time on that cold tile floor. And then she placed one hand on her stomach, this time deliberately, this time consciously, and she made a silent promise to the tiny life inside her. I will not let them own you. The next morning, breakfast was served at 8 sharp as always. Clement sat at the head of the table, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, with the kind of face that had probably never looked young even when it was. Victoria sat to his right, poised and immaculate, a woman who wore composure like armor. Sommy scrolled through her phone with practiced disinterest. Felix, her Felix, sat beside Charlene and touched her hand briefly when she sat down, a small, warm gesture that made everything more complicated. You look tired, darling, Victoria said, her eyes lifting briefly from her coffee cup. Just didn't sleep well, Charlene said with a smile. You should rest more. Victoria set the cup down. It's important, especially now. The table continued its breakfast. Silverware clinked. Orange juice was poured. But Charlene had caught it. Especially now. She looked at Victoria. Victoria was already looking at her toast. Clement cleared his throat and said, without looking up from his newspaper, Dr. Osei will be visiting the estate on Thursday for our quarterly health reviews. Wonderful, said Victoria. Felix said, I didn't know we did quarterly reviews. We've done it for years, Clement said simply, turning a page. Charlene smiled and sipped her tea. And underneath the table, her hand was gripping her phone, where she had already sent Jazz a single text message the night before. I need you to find everything you can about a Dr. Osei connected to the Kensington family. Don't use your real name. Don't tell anyone. Jazz had replied at 2 a.m. with 3 words. Already on it. The nursery existed. The journal was in her bag. The family was watching. And Charlene Kensington, the quiet one, the outsider, the woman they had never quite taken seriously, had just begun to watch back. What exactly had Dr. Osei been hired to do? And how long had this family been planning for a baby that wasn't theirs to plan for? Jazz Sambachukwu was not someone you underestimated twice. She was the kind of woman who could smile at you, compliment your shoes, and simultaneously be dismantling your entire life history through 3 browser tabs and a contact she had in every industry. She had been Charlene's best friend since university, the loud to Charlene's quiet, the fire to her frost. And when Charlene needed someone to dig without getting buried, Jazz was the only call that made sense. She called Charlene at 6:47 a.m., before the mansion had fully woken up. I found him, Jazz said. There was no greeting. No preamble. That alone told Charlene everything about what Jazz had uncovered. Dr. Kofi Osei, reproductive endocrinologist, formerly of the Harley Street Clinic in London, currently operating as a private consultant. No public clients listed, which means all his clients are the kind of people who pay specifically, so their names don't appear anywhere. Charlene was already out of bed, standing near the window, watching the estate's manicured garden below where 2 groundskeepers moved in the early mist. How is he connected to the Kensingtons? Clement Kensington has been paying him a private retainer for 4 years. Jazz paused for effect, because Jazz always paused for effect. Charlene. For years. You've only been married for 2. The silence that followed was the kind that rearranges furniture inside a person. They started planning before the wedding, Charlene said. It wasn't a question. Before the engagement announcement even went public, Jazz confirmed. I found a shell company, Kensington Heritage Holdings, that's been funneling payments to a private medical consultancy that Dr. Osei runs out of Geneva. The consultancy specializes in one very specific thing. Tell me. Genetic legacy planning. Jazz let that sit for exactly 2 seconds. Which is a very expensive, very discreet way of saying, they pay this man to ensure that the children born into certain families carry the right genetic markers. Monitor hormone levels. Advise on timing. In some cases, her voice dropped lower. Influence outcomes. Charlene's hand pressed flat against the cold glass of the window. Influence outcomes, she repeated quietly. I don't know how far they went with you specifically, but those blood draws Felix told you were routine last month? I traced the processing lab. It doesn't belong to any standard NHS or private hospital network. It belongs to Dr. Osei's consultancy. The groundskeepers below continued their work, oblivious. A bird landed on the stone fountain in the garden's center. The morning looked completely ordinary. Charlene's world was not. There's one more thing, Jazz said. And I need you to sit down for this one. I'm standing. Sit down, Charlene. She sat on the edge of the bed. Clement Kensington had a son before Felix. Older, from a relationship before Victoria. His name was Adrian. The child was born with a rare genetic condition that effectively ended any chance of him inheriting or running the empire. Clement had the condition traced back through the maternal bloodline, and he has been, since then, obsessive about ensuring that the next Kensington heir carries what he calls clean blood. That's the actual phrase used in documents I found from a legal dispute filed in 2019 that was very quickly settled and buried. Jazz exhaled. This isn't just about a grandchild, Charlene. To Clement, this baby is a legacy correction. A do-over. The child he's been engineering for years. Charlene sat very still. And then something happened that she hadn't expected. She didn't feel fear. Not in that moment. What she felt was a cold, clarifying anger. The kind that doesn't shake. The kind that builds a plan. She found the second journal 3 hours later. She hadn't been looking for it. Or maybe some quiet, instinctive part of her had been looking for it all along without admitting it. She had been moving through the East Wing again on the pretense of looking for a book from the library, and she had noticed that the nursery door was now locked. Dead-bolted, actually, a new lock, the kind that required a key. Installed overnight. They knew she had been in there. Or they suspected. She kept walking. Unhurried. Browsed the library. Selected a novel at random. And on her way back, she paused at the small reading alcove near the end of the hall. A recessed space with built-in shelves and a cushioned bench that no one ever used. Behind a row of decorative volumes that had clearly never been read, her fingers found the edge of something smooth and flat. Another journal. This one navy blue. Clement's handwriting. She had seen it on enough formal family documents to recognize the heavy, deliberate strokes. She didn't take it from the shelf. She read it where she stood, angled so that anyone passing would simply see her browsing books. The entries were dated across the past 18 months. Felix has chosen well despite himself. The woman is intelligent, more than he realizes. That could be a complication or an asset, depending on how events unfold. She turned a few pages. Victoria confirms the dietary supplements have been incorporated without incident. Dr. Osei is satisfied with the progression. We are, at most, for months from the window. Dietary supplements. Charlene thought about the beautiful hand-prepared morning smoothies that appeared outside their bedroom door every single day without fail. The ones Victoria said were prepared by the private nutritionist. The ones Felix drank without question because Felix trusted his family the way only someone raised inside a lie could trust it. Completely, and without needing proof. She kept reading. Sommy raised a concern tonight. She asked whether we should tell Felix. I told her that Felix's sentimentality would compromise the process. He would interfere. He would tell Charlene. And Charlene would run. Charlene read that line 3 times. He would tell Charlene. And Charlene would run. Clement had known. Even then, months ago, Clement had understood exactly what Charlene would do if she found out. Because a man who treats people as pieces on a board always understands, on some level, that the pieces with dignity will eventually refuse to be moved. She replaced the journal exactly as she had found it. She walked back to her room. She sat on the bed and opened the novel she had borrowed and stared at the same page for 20 minutes without reading a single word. Then she sent Kendra a message. How fast can you get a car to the East Service Road without using any name connected to you or me? Kendra replied in 40 seconds. Give me 48 hours. Don't pack a bag they can notice. But the universe, it seemed, had a different schedule. That evening, Clement called a family dinner. Not unusual. He did this periodically, formal affairs where attendance was not optional and the real agenda was never listed on any menu. Charlene dressed carefully. Understated. Nothing that suggested she knew anything. She wore the pearl earrings Victoria had gifted her at Christmas because wearing them said, "I am still inside your story," and she needed them to believe that for just 48 more hours. The dining room was its usual spectacle. Long mahogany table, candelabras, courses served in choreographed silence by staff who had learned to be invisible. Clement waited until the third course. Then he set down his fork, looked directly at Charlene, not at Felix, not at the table, and said, "We should talk about the future of this family." Felix looked up. "Is everything all right, Father?" "Better than all right." Clement's smile was the kind that didn't involve his eyes. "We are at a significant moment, and significant moments deserve to be honored." He raised his glass. "To new beginnings." Everyone raised their glasses. Charlene raised hers. She even smiled. And underneath the table, her hand rested on her stomach, quiet, protective, furious. Victoria was watching her over the rim of a wine glass she had barely touched all evening. Sommy's eyes were cast down. Felix was smiling the innocent smile of a man who thought this was just another of his father's grand pronouncements. And Clement was looking at Charlene the way a man looks at something he believes he already owns. She smiled back at him. Let him think it. Let them all think it for just a little longer. Because the woman they had surveilled, supplemented, monitored, and quietly maneuvered, the woman they had discussed in journals and private meetings, as though she were a vessel rather than a person, was already 3 moves ahead of every single one of them. The only question now was Felix. Did he know? And if he didn't, what would it do to him when he found out what his family had done in his name, to the woman he loved, for a legacy he had never asked to carry? The bag was a problem. Charlene had packed it in 15-minute intervals across 2 days. A sock here, a document there, slipped into a tote she kept in the back of the bathroom cabinet behind spare toiletries that no one had reason to touch. She had done it calmly, methodically, the way you do something when panic is not an option and precision is the only currency that matters. Her passport, the leather journal with Victoria's handwriting, photographs she had taken on her phone, printed quietly at the pharmacy in town during what she had told Felix was a routine errand. A small amount of cash Kendra had transferred through an account that had no visible connection to either of them. She had thought of everything, except Sommy. It was 5:40 in the morning when Charlene came downstairs with the tote over her shoulder and her heart rate at a number she preferred not to calculate. The East Service Road was a 7-minute walk through the garden. Kendra's contact, a quiet, reliable man named Benson who asked no questions and drove like he had once been running from something himself, would be there at 6. The mansion was silent. Staff didn't arrive until 7. Felix slept deeply and always had. She had her hand on the side door when the kitchen light clicked on. Sommy was sitting at the island in a silk robe, both hands wrapped around a mug of tea, looking at Charlene with an expression that was impossible to read. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Charlene didn't move her hand from the door handle. "You found the journals," Sommy said. "Not a question." "I don't know what you're talking about," Charlene said. Sommy looked at the tote, then back at Charlene's face. Then she did something completely unexpected. She set down the mug, pressed both palms flat on the counter, and looked away toward the dark window over the sink. "I told him not to," she said quietly. 2 years ago, when this started, I told Father that what he was doing was wrong. That you were a person, not a project." She paused. "He told me that sentiment was a luxury the Kensington name couldn't afford." Charlene studied her. In 2 years of living in this house, she had never once seen Sommy's composure crack. Not at Christmas, not at the formal dinners, not even during the quiet, terrible argument she had once overheard between Sommy and Clement in the study that had ended with a door slamming hard enough to rattle the hallway paintings. "Why are you telling me this now?" Charlene asked. "Because you're leaving." Sommy finally looked at her. Her eyes were tired in a way that had nothing to do with the early hour. "And you should. But before you do, you need to know something about Felix." Charlene's grip on the door handle tightened. "Felix found the nursery 3 weeks ago," Sommy said. "He came to me. He was confused, upset. I told him to speak to Father. He did." She stopped, took a slow breath. Father told him it was a surprise, a gesture of hope and love for the family's future. And Felix, her voice dipped almost to a whisper, Felix believed him. Because Felix has spent his entire life choosing to believe the most innocent version of every story this family tells. Charlene felt something complicated move through her chest. "He doesn't know about Dr. Osei?" she asked. "No." "The supplements?" "No." "The journals?" "The genetic planning?" All of it. Sommy shook her head slowly. Felix knows his father is intense about legacy. He doesn't know his father has been orchestrating your pregnancy like a corporate acquisition. She picked up her mug again. There is a difference between a man who is complicit and a man who is blind. Felix is blind, Charlene. Willfully sometimes. Frustratingly. But blind. The kitchen clock ticked. 5:46 a.m. Charlene had 14 minutes. Why does that matter to me right now? She asked. And her voice was not cruel, but it was honest, which in that moment was its own kind of cruelty. Because when you leave, and you should leave, I'm not stopping you. Felix is going to be the one left in this house trying to understand what happened. And if he doesn't have the truth, Clement will write that story for him. Sommy met her eyes steadily. My father will tell Felix that you ran because you didn't love him enough. That the baby frightened you. That you were never really committed to this family. And Felix will grieve that version because it will be the only one he's given. The words landed exactly where Sommy intended them to land. Charlene closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Then she opened them. She reached into the tote, pulled out her phone, opened the photo gallery, and slid it across the counter toward Sommy. The photographs of the nursery, the screenshots of the journal entries, the lab connection Jazz had traced. Make sure he sees all of it, Charlene said. Every single thing. Don't soften it. Don't translate it. Let him see exactly who his father is. Sommy looked down at the phone. Something moved across her face, relief maybe, or the particular exhaustion of someone who has been carrying a secret that was never theirs to carry. Go, Sommy said quietly. I'll handle Felix. Charlene took the phone back, airdropped every file to Sommy's number, and walked out the side door into the cool gray morning without looking back. She was in Benson's car by 5:58. She texted Jazz a single word, moving, and Jazz replied with an address. A service department in the city that Jazz had booked under a name connected to neither of them. Kendra was already there, had been since the night before, with food and clean clothes and the particular fierce energy of an older sister who had been waiting for the moment she was needed. Charlene sat in the back seat and watched the Kensington estate disappear in the wing mirror and felt. Not relief, not yet. Something closer to the first real breath she had taken in weeks. The baby was real. The danger was real. And now, finally, her response was real. Felix called at 8:23 a.m. She watched his name on the screen for 4 full rings. Then she answered. Charlene. His voice was wrecked. Raw in a way she had never heard from him. Felix, who was always measured, always composed, always the gentle buffer between her and the sharp edges of his family. Sommy showed me. He stopped. She could hear him breathing. Tell me where you are. Please. Just tell me you're safe. I'm safe, she said. I didn't know. His voice cracked on the last word. I swear to you, I did not know any of it. The doctor, the supplements, the Charlene, I had no idea. I know, she said. And she did know. She had believed Sommy. She believed Felix. Which somehow made the grief of it more complicated. Not less, because betrayal from an enemy is clean. But the damage done to you by people who claim to love someone you love is a different kind of wound entirely. I'm going to fix this, Felix said. Felix. She kept her voice steady. Even. This is not something you fix with a phone call. Your father has been treating me like a genetic asset since before we were married. Your mother has been journaling about my hormone levels. A doctor I never consented to see has had access to my body's most private information. She paused. This is not a misunderstanding. This is a pattern. And I need you to understand that before you say another word about fixing anything. Silence on the line. Long, heavy silence. What do you need from me? He finally asked. And something about the way he asked it. Not what do you want, not what should I do, but what do you need, placing her at the center rather than himself, made her exhale slowly. I need time, she said. And I need you to confront your father. Not manage him. Not negotiate with him. Confront him. With everything Sommy showed you. On record. In front of your family's legal counsel if necessary. Okay, Felix said quietly. And Felix? Yes. If you choose your father over this, over me, over our child, I need you to tell me that now. Clearly. So I can plan accordingly. The pause that followed was the most important pause of their marriage. I choose you, he said. I choose you both. Whatever that costs me. She nodded even though he couldn't see it. Then do what needs to be done, she said. I'll be watching. She hung up. Kendra handed her a cup of tea from the passenger seat without a word. just warm, steady, sisterly presence. Jazz was on the sofa with her laptop open, already building a file that could, if necessary, be handed to a solicitor, a journalist, or both. And Charlene sat in the quiet of that borrowed apartment, one hand resting on the small curve of her stomach, and began to prepare for what came next. Not escape, not hiding, something far more powerful than either. She was going back. But she was going back as someone that family had fundamentally underestimated from the very first day she walked through their marble doors. And this time, she was bringing the truth with her like a weapon. The question was, when she walked back into that dining room and placed everything on the table, which Kensington would crumble first? And would Felix be standing beside her, or across from her, when the walls came down? She gave them 6 days. 6 days to sit in that mansion and wonder. 6 days to let the silence do what silence does best, stretch and tighten and fill every room with the particular discomfort of people who are accustomed to controlling narratives suddenly finding themselves outside one. 6 days for Felix to have the conversations that needed having, for Sommy to decide which side of history she wanted to stand on, and for Clement and Victoria Kensington to either come to terms with what they had done or dig deeper into the story they had been telling themselves for years.
Cheers to that.
On the 7th day, Charlene came back. She did not
To
call
family.
ahead.
And
She
good
did not
times.
text.
Cheers to that.
She arrived at the front entrance of the Kensington estate at precisely 11
To
in the
family.
morning in a car
And
driven
good
by
times.
Benson,
Cheers to that.
wearing a dress the color of midnight blue, her hair pulled back,
To
her
family.
face composed
good
in that
times.
particular
Cheers to
expression
that.
that people who had known her longest recognized as the most dangerous version
To
of her.
family.
And
Not
good
angry,
times.
Cheers
not
to that.
emotional, not reactive. Simply present. Fully,
To
completely,
family.
immovably
And good
present.
times.
Cheers to
Jazz
that.
was in the car behind her. Kendra was beside Jazz.
To
And on
family.
Charlene's phone,
And good times.
in a folder
Cheers
she
to
had
that.
organized with the quiet precision of someone who had spent 6 days doing nothing but preparing, was everything. The journal entries, the lab documentation, the financial trail connecting Clement to Dr. Osei through Kensington Heritage Holdings, a signed affidavit from a former patient of Dr. Osei's, a woman from another wealthy family who had discovered similar interventions and had been waiting, quietly and bitterly, for a moment to matter. And a letter from a solicitor whose name was well known enough in certain circles that simply seeing it on a letterhead changed the temperature of any room. Charlene rang the doorbell of her own home. She felt the symbolism of that and decided she didn't mind it. The housekeeper let her in with wide eyes and said nothing, which was wise. She found them in the drawing room. All 4 of them, as though they had been assembled there, waiting, which she suspected they had been. The Kensingtons were nothing if not theatrical about their composure. Clement sat in the high-backed chair nearest the fireplace, silver-haired and still, a man performing calm the way only men who are deeply not calm ever bother to perform it. Victoria sat on the settee with her hands folded and her spine perfectly straight. Sommy stood near the window, and when Charlene entered, Sommy looked at her with an expression that was equal parts apology and solidarity. Felix stood near the door. He saw her and took 1 step forward, and then stopped, because he could read her, had always been able to read her, and what he read now told him that what she needed from him in this moment was not comfort. It was witness. He stepped back and gave her the room. That small act of understanding nearly undid her. She didn't let it. She walked to the center of the drawing room and stood there and let the silence build for exactly long enough. Then she looked at Clement and said, "I think it's time we had an honest conversation. As a family." Clement's expression didn't flicker. "Charlene, we're glad I'm going to need you not to start with pleasantries," she said calmly. "Because what I have to say is going to be uncomfortable, and pleasantries will only make it take longer." Victoria made a small sound, not quite a protest, not quite agreement. Charlene opened her phone. She connected it to the drawing room screen, the one they used for family presentations during board review weekends, which she had always privately found grimly appropriate, and she began. She walked them through it methodically. The nursery, the journals, the dietary supplements introduced into her morning routine without her knowledge or consent. Dr. Osei's retainer, the shell company, the lab that had processed her blood without her awareness. The entry in Clement's journal describing her as a component in a legacy strategy. The former patient's affidavit. The solicitor's letter. She presented it the way she would present a business case. Clearly, sequentially, without dramatics, because she had learned something important in 6 days of preparation. The most powerful thing she could do in a room full of people who expected her to cry was to be the only one in it who didn't. The room changed as she spoke. Clement's stillness became a different kind of stillness, the stillness of a man recalculating. Victoria's folded hands tightened until the knuckles showed pale against her skin. Sommy looked at the floor. Felix looked only at Charlene, and his face was doing something she had never seen it do before. It was breaking, quietly and completely, the expression of a man watching the full architecture of his family's mythology collapse in real time. When she finished, she set the phone down on the side table and looked at Clement. "I want to hear you say it," she said. "Out loud. In this room. With your son present." Clement said nothing. "Say that you authorized medical intervention on my body without my knowledge or consent. Say that you funded a private physician to monitor my reproductive health as part of a legacy strategy. Say that you discussed me in private documents as a means to an end." She held his gaze without blinking. "Say it, Clement, because if you can say it out loud, in front of your family, then perhaps there is something real left in this room to work with. But if you can't, then we already know everything we need to know about who you are." The fire crackled in the hearth. The clock on the mantel ticked. Clement Kensington, a man who had built an empire across 3 continents, who had negotiated with governments and outlasted competitors and controlled outcomes in rooms far more intimidating than this one, looked at his daughter-in-law and said nothing. And that silence was its own confession. It was Victoria who spoke first. And no one in the room expected what she said. "I told him it was wrong." Her voice was quiet, controlled still, but something underneath the control had shifted. Something that sounded, impossibly, like the first note of genuine remorse. "From the beginning, when Kofi Osei first came to us, when Clement outlined what he wanted, I told him that this was not how you build a family." She stopped. Her jaw worked briefly. "He told me that love was a luxury and legacy was a responsibility. And she exhaled through her nose. "I chose his version. Because I had been choosing his version of things for 34 years, and I didn't know how to stop." Felix made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Victoria looked at her son, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in a long time, and said, "I am sorry, Felix. I am sorry that we did this in your name without your knowledge. And I am sorry, Charlene, that we treated you as though your personhood was secondary to our plans." It was not a complete redemption. It was not the operatic collapse Charlene might have imagined in weaker moments. It was small and imperfect and real, which made it, in its own way, more significant than any grand gesture could have been. Clement still said nothing, and Felix looked at his father. This man he had spent his entire life trying to make proud, trying to understand, trying to love despite the distance and the coldness and the relentless architecture of expectation, and said in the quietest, most devastating voice Charlene had ever heard from him, "You treated my wife like a project. You treated my child like a product. And you didn't even trust me enough to tell me." He paused. "I don't know how to forgive that. I don't know if I can. But I know that you will not have any role in this child's life until you can stand in front of Charlene and say what she asked you to say. And mean it." Clement looked at his son. And for the first time since Charlene had known him, for the first time, she suspected, in a very long time, something moved behind those controlled, calculating eyes that looked uncomfortably close to the thing he had spent decades calling a luxury. It looked like grief. 3 weeks later, Dr. Osei's private consultancy was the subject of a quiet but pointed legal inquiry. Kensington Heritage Holdings was dissolved. The solicitor's letter had done what solicitors' letters from certain names always do. The nursery in the East Wing was dismantled. Not destroyed. Charlene had asked for that specifically. She didn't want destruction. She wanted choice. And so the crib, the rocking chair, the golden mobile, all of it was moved into storage and would be reassembled only if, and when she decided, on her own terms, in her own time, in a room she had chosen herself. She and Felix moved into a smaller house. Their house. His name and hers on the deed. No family money involved, no Kensington marble or chandelier or housekeeper who reported back to Victoria. Just the two of them and the life that was growing quietly and stubbornly between them. Kendra visited every weekend. Jazz was already planning the baby shower with an energy that suggested she had been waiting her entire life to plan a baby shower and was going to treat it accordingly. Sommy called once a week. Brief, careful conversations that were slowly building towards something that might one day resemble a genuine relationship. Not the performance of family, but the actual practice of it. Clement sent a letter. It was 3 pages long. She read it twice. It was not perfect. It was the writing of a man who had spent a lifetime in control trying, for perhaps the first time, to surrender some of it onto paper. It was inadequate in places. It was, in other places, more honest than she had expected him to be capable of. She didn't respond immediately. She put it on the desk in the room that would become the nursery and left it there, because she had not yet decided what it deserved from her. And that decision, that power to decide, to take her time, to grant or withhold on her own terms, was the thing they had tried to take from her from the beginning. She was keeping it. All of it. On the last evening of that month, Charlene sat in the new house in a chair by the window with one hand resting on the gentle curve of her stomach and watched the sun go down over a street that belonged to no dynasty, no legacy plan, no man with a leather journal and a private physician on retainer. Just hers. Just theirs. And she thought about the nursery they had built before she even knew. She thought about the journals and the supplements and the bloodline obsession and the elaborate, arrogant machinery of control that had been running quietly beneath her life for years. And then she thought about the moment she had walked back into that drawing room, dressed in midnight blue. No dramatics. No tears. Just the truth, organized and undeniable, placed in the center of the room like a stone that could not be moved. The most dangerous thing you can do to a woman who has been underestimated, she thought, is give her enough time to prepare. She smiled at the window. The baby moved, the first time, a flutter so small and certain it felt like a secret being shared. And Charlene laughed quietly in the empty room, a sound that had no audience and needed none. They planned for the child, she thought. They never planned for the mother. A gentle word before you go. Charlene's story is one that many people will recognize in pieces, not the marble mansions or the billionaire families, but the feeling of being managed instead of loved, of being seen as a role rather than a person, of discovering that people you trusted had been making decisions about your life without you. The lesson here is not that family is the enemy. It is that love, real love, never requires your silence, your surrender, or your unknowing cooperation. Real love asks for your presence, not your compliance. And if you ever find yourself in a room where the plans being made are plans you were never consulted about, remember Charlene. Take your time, gather your truth, and walk back and prepared, because the most powerful version of you is not the one that runs. It is the one that returns. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and tell us in the comments what moment hit you the hardest. We read every single one.